Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We still have a lot of folks signing in right now, so we're going to give it just about a minute before we get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm Anil Chawla, founder and CEO at ArchiveSocial, and I could not be more excited about today's presentation, Everything You Need to Know About Nextdoor in 2019. Now, for those of you who have joined ArchiveSocial's webinar series in the past, we have this great agency to agency series that we've showcased across the past year and a half or so, where we've told story after story from the agency perspective on how to succeed on social media. So we go to the next slide here. You can see some of the history of our agency to agency webinar series, topics like repurposing content, navigating controversies, and of course, a crowd favorite, troll hunting. And each and every time, what we did was we showcased an agency talking about how to succeed on a social networking platform. Today's presentation is a special one, and it's a different angle. Rather than just talking about how to use a social networking platform and succeed on it, we're going to talk to a social networking platform itself, and really one of the most important social networking platforms in the public sector sphere. And that platform is, of course, Nextdoor. So I'm really excited to introduce our guest speaker here today, Joseph Porcelli. For those of you who don't know Joseph, he is a public agency lead at Nextdoor, and he has been a tremendous figure in the civic tech, civic engagement space for a long time. Today, he helps develop the strategies and partnerships with public agencies across the Nextdoor partner base. He's been there for quite some time, but prior to that, he also has a storied career in government and supporting government agencies. And for those of you who've had the honor of having a customer service request handled by Joseph, a conversation with him, you know that he goes the extra mile, and he does that not only for you, but for some of the most prominent agencies in the country, like the White House, like FEMA and others. So it's really our privilege to talk to Joseph here today. And I mentioned that we're taking a different angle with our presentation. So I'm going to flip on my webcam here and say hello to the audience. This is going to be a live interactive session, a live Q&A with Joseph. Joseph, if you want to show the folks your smiling face as well. As a public agency lead for the social network used by over 91% of neighborhoods in America, really a privilege to have you here. Joseph's truly the guy next door and a good friend of mine. Joseph, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Anil. It's an honor to be here with you and everyone who has made time in their day to listen to our conversation and hopefully learn something really valuable.
Well, absolutely. And on that note, we actually prompted this audience for questions prior to today's presentation, hoping that we would get a few.
We'll do our best.
A flood of questions. We have a lot to cover, a lot of interest in Nextdoor, and folks want to hear more about how Nextdoor works, what's new in 2019. So just what I thought we'd do is, while I'm sure folks like looking at our face right now, it'd be good to have some background on Nextdoor for those that may be a little less familiar, understand what the platform does, how it works, and also for those who do have some more knowledge about Nextdoor, hear what's latest and greatest in terms of the platform in 2019. Why don't we take about 15 to 20 minutes with that level set, and then of course we'll bring the webcams back and dive into the audience questions. How's that sound?
All right, sounds good.
Okay, sounds good. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right, so let's just switch gears here on my end. So, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning if you're over on the West Coast. Again, my name is Joseph Porcelli, and I'm a public agency lead at Nextdoor. And I'm going to just walk you through a little bit about what Nextdoor is, sort of the foundation of our platform, which is to help residents connect, communicate, and be of service to each other. And then I'll switch hats and talk about how our government partners, the over 5,000 around the country, are using Nextdoor to communicate with their residents to increase satisfaction, trust, and safety. And I'm going to try and do this in about 15 to 20 minutes. So we're going to have some fun going through some slides here quickly. So you heard a little bit about my background. I've worked for lots of different public agencies. So I really come and approach doing webinars with folks as a practitioner, and I've worked to weave that into some of the things that I'll share with you here today. So first of all, if you wanted to follow me and stay in touch on Twitter, I'm at Joseph Porcelli. And if you want, you can tweet using the hashtag NextdoorGov for this presentation, and that's also a hashtag I follow. So feel free to reach out anytime. So as we think about Nextdoor, before Nextdoor started in 2011, there was a study that was done that basically said most people in our country don't know each other or know each other's names, and that's something we wanted to set out to change. And when we looked at the different social networks that were out there, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, they all did a really great job for their specific purpose, but there was not a social network for the neighborhood. And that's really the job that Nextdoor is. That's what we're trying to accomplish. We want to connect neighbors that don't yet know each other. And when we do a really good job, and this has happened, in 91% of neighborhoods around the United States, neighbors like the people in this picture come together. They're able to do things for each other. They're able to keep each other apprised of things that are happening in their neighborhood and help each other out during their times of need, or just lend a hand for the sake of being kind. And so this picture of this community here in Washington, D.C., all these neighbors got to know each other because of Nextdoor. And it's something we're really proud of. And it's really core to who we are as an organization and what we care about and what we're looking to contribute to the world. Now, some things that differentiate Nextdoor from other social networks is that everybody on Nextdoor has to first verify that they live in their neighborhood. And every single neighborhood that is started is actually started by a community member. So you get real people using real names and living at a real address. And people verify to join Nextdoor by either having a postcard sent to their home, or the other most common way is our system can call your home phone or your bill phone, and if your home phone or your cell phone, excuse me, and if the billing address matches, we let you in. And Nextdoor is really useful. So there's this sense of privacy, there's this sense of community, and we require our members to communicate with each other in a respectful and kind way. And so it really works well. Now, neighbors use Nextdoor for all kinds of things, from getting recommendations. In fact, I just posted that we needed our windows cleaned, and somebody came by yesterday, in fact, cleaned the windows, and they were the most recommended window cleaner in Annapolis, Maryland, where I live. So that was very helpful for us. It didn't take long. I had a great experience, and I wrote back that, yeah, this company's awesome. People also use Nextdoor for lost pets, to buy and sell things or give things away for free. And a small percentage of conversations are around public safety, crime, things that are going on. But during times of need, like during an emergency or a hurricane or some other kind of disaster or wildfire, Nextdoor really becomes critical and helps people help each other and get information out and be there for each other. In fact, one of the things I've been organizing in my own neighborhood in Annapolis during the past shutdown, we learned that our local folks at the Coast Guard, who are very important to us, we're all out in the water and play all the time, weren't getting paid. So a couple neighbors and I organized to make sure our local Coast Guard station was fed every day for 2 weeks, and a little project called Feed It Forward. You can search that on Twitter and Instagram. There's a couple other campaigns using it, but it's something, because we were all connected on Nextdoor, we were able to do for each other. So as I mentioned, Nextdoor is available in 91% of neighborhoods all across the United States. We also operate in a number of different countries across Europe and now in Australia as well. So we have sort of global ambitions, and we're trying to bring community to the entire world. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. I've been talking about how neighbors use Nextdoor. We have a free government interface called Nextdoor for public agencies, and there's over 5,000 public agencies that use Nextdoor around the world to communicate with their residents. And what we hear from folks is they really like that they're able target communications into specific geographies. So here in Annapolis, the Annapolis Police Department, Emergency Management Agency, or Fire Department can communicate to everyone in the entire city, or just the city maybe wanted to give us an update that, our street was under construction or there was some sort of other disruption, and they could just target that into the neighborhood I live, which is called Eastport. So you have real residents, real names, you can geo-target communications. And Nextdoor members have joined Nextdoor because they want to be a part of their community. So you're engaging a really, I think, you're engaging an audience that wants to be engaged, that cares about the community, and wants to work with government to improve quality of life and safety. So we hear those are things that really matter to our partners. Now, Nextdoor agency works in some very specific ways here. So first of all, it is an opt-out platform. What that means is that there's a built-in audience. So whether you have you're a really small town with 1,000 residents and there's 500 people on Nextdoor, or a city, of 100,000 or whatever, county or a state, Nextdoor will allow you to immediately communicate with all of our members. So they don't have to like or subscribe to your post or follow you. They automatically get your messages. All communications on Nextdoor are initiated by the agency communicator. So it's not like I can go and tweet at someone on Nextdoor. I would see a message from Amy Niguez, who's our local police officer who posts on Nextdoor, or Kenny White from the fire department, or Susan from City Hall. But I can't go and start a conversation with them. I only see their posts when they initiate communication. So there isn't lots of other content to monitor. As I talked about, communications can be geo-targeted into a neighborhood or a service area. So just north of here in Baltimore, the Baltimore Police Department uses Nextdoor and has all their commanders assigned to specific districts where they work. And so does the Department of Public Works, where they have outreach coordinators for each of their districts. They are responsible for communicating into their districts, and they can communicate district-wide or target a message into a neighborhood. And the director, for example, can communicate to everybody in Baltimore. That's kind of how that works. Now, all members automatically get your messages, but they can choose to mute individual authors or unsubscribe from the agency. So if they don't appreciate what it is you're sharing or don't care about that content, they have the opportunity to opt out. And when you post, messages show up immediately on nextdoor.com, on the app or mobile web, and then the next day get distributed out via email, unless you send an urgent alert, which sends a text message, a push notification, and ignores digest settings and sends out an email immediately to all members. So these are just a couple of things that most people ask about, and I wanted to make sure I covered today. Some other things to note is that on Nextdoor, all the conversations between neighbors are private. As a public agency communicator, as a government communicator, you're not exposed to all those conversations. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, our promise to our members is that the conversations between them is private just to those who live in their neighborhood. Secondly, you'd be overwhelmed by the volume of conversations, especially because so many people use Nextdoor, and because most of those conversations are going to have absolutely nothing to do with the government business and would totally be overwhelming and impossible to manage. Residents can thank you for your posts. They can reply to your posts. They can also send private messages to the individual authors. You can turn off private messages, and when needed, you can close down a discussion or not allow discussion if there isn't anything to be talked about. So we give you lots of choices and options there and how you manage that. So with that said, I wanted to talk a little bit about what is the approach about using Nextdoor. And in the email that we sent out, we talked about this concept of caring out loud, to care out loud. And what I mean by that, it's demonstrating that you're listening, it's demonstrating that you're there to serve, and it's being engaging with members. It's kind of like if you walk into City Hall or some sort of office and someone welcomes you, they take time to answer your questions, and you feel like you're being taken care of. The same thing applies online, especially on Nextdoor. People really want to be taken care of, if you will. So I encourage you to communicate with the aim to increase customer satisfaction, safety, and trust. And that's really kind of the end game. Like sometimes I hear people talking about communicating because they want to increase engagement. That's great. I really appreciate that. But there's a more important question: why? How does that matter? And in some of the surveys and studies that we've done, we really know that people want to, they care about customer satisfaction. They care about safety, they care about trust. And this is something we hear from our public agency partners and our members as well. It's also important to communicate regularly. People want to know what's going on, right? So it doesn't mean you have to communicate every day, but if there's a service disruption or some sort of safety issue, people want to hear about that as that happens. And people also want their communications to be targeted and locally relevant. So, for example, don't tell me if it's Anne Arundel County government. I live kind of on the south side. I don't want to hear about something going 20 miles away because I'm probably not going to go to that, and I probably don't necessarily care that because it's too far away. However, if Route 50 and Route 97 are blocked and I can't get somewhere, I probably should know that because, in fact, my wife is out with my child right now and they're halfway across the county. It'd be good to know if the highway was shut down immediately. Just some common sense things there. The other thing is you should really seek input and educate with Nextdoor polls. They're a really powerful feature. And if you log into Nextdoor and go to the agency user community or our help center, there's lots of guides available to you on how you can use those. And the last thing about caring out loud that I think is helpful is close the loop. If you ask for feedback from somebody or you promise to follow up, close that loop because that will help people trust you and it'll make them feel like you heard them and that you cared enough about getting back to them so that that will build trust and that will increase their engagement further in the future because they know that this is a two-way street. So what's new? The neighborhood map is back. If you've been with Nextdoor for a couple of years ago, this actually came back last year, but I'm still getting asked questions about it. So I thought I would cover it during the webinar here. The neighborhood map is on the left-hand side navigation. You click on neighborhoods. It shows you a map of all your neighborhoods, and you can click on any of the neighborhoods and get statistics. You can also now include video from YouTube and Vimeo, and actually Facebook. I should have added that to this slide because that is a recent development. So you just put the link in and it renders on Nextdoor on the mobile web. So folks are able to see videos now, which was a big request from folks. You can geo-target addresses by typing in the address in the composed post box, and then you can expand out by 0.5 miles, 1 mile, or 2 mile, or you can use the draw rectangle tool to make that even larger, or click on neighborhoods around that area to either add them or detract them. Some really great changes to urgent alerts. In the past, it was just 110 characters. Now it can have unlimited characters. You can add photos, you can add videos. Just keep in mind, though, that the first 110 characters still applies to text messages. So if you have something that's really critical that you want to get out to folks, and there will be many folks signed up via text, better get that information in the first 100 texts. So think of that as like a headline. Post impressions. This is actually great. People have asked us, how many people are our messages reaching? And at the bottom of each of your posts now, there are post impressions, and that actually counts as that is unique impressions. So here it says 50,378 impressions. It's actually 50,378 people saw this message that was posted on Nextdoor. Under the metrics tab, there's also something called content and engagement that is new, and that will allow you to download all of the content and engage all of the things you posted and all related content, and that will allow you to do a couple things. One, this is actually how you pull out information should you get a records request. So for many of you who have questions about how do I do that on Nextdoor, this is your answer, and Anil and I can go into that in further detail a little bit later. But you can also do some other really great stuff with this. You can see how many times have we posted in the last 30 days. You can answer the questions of how many thanks and replies did we get, how many impressions, how many unique people saw each of the messages, and then break that down over time. If you're an organization that has users assigned to specific geographies, you can answer questions like, did everybody in all of the districts receive a message from our communicators this month or over the last year? And for those of you who deal with grants and need to provide data for, I can't think of the word, but to make sure you're fulfilling your grant properly, you can use these kinds of reports to say, we posted 15 messages about X safety or whatever the grant was about, and here's the total number of unique people who saw those messages over the last year. We also give you the ability to report members. So this is actually a picture of my profile in Nextdoor. I always try and sneak a picture of my cute daughter in all my presentations. So here it is. But if I'm someone who keeps asking the same question or is being disrespectful in any way, you can click on my name within the newsfeed. So I would comment on one of your posts. You click on my name, and then on my profile, there's a little drop down caret. You would click that drop down and choose report. And that pings our neighborhood operations team to go take a look and ensure that I'm communicating respectfully to you or to other members. So this is really useful, and a lot of folks have told us they appreciate this. So what's coming? A couple things we're currently working on right now. Threaded inline replies. That means that if someone comments, you'll be able to comment inline just beneath that. Right now, you have to comment at the end. And if you have a discussion with lots of comments and replies, that can kind of get lost. So that will be coming soon. And then we're changing the way people see comments. So in my neighborhood in Annapolis, I can see my neighborhood and then I think about 20 other neighborhoods. And I see if I share a message like I'm trying to sell something or give something away, I want as many of my neighbors to see it. So there's that's called a neighborhood cluster. And for large counties and states, when you post, and if you post in that large county or state, everyone across the county or the state can see the message. That's kind of a confusing experience. So what will happen in, I'm hoping in a month or something like that, when you post to that entire county or to that entire city or state for that matter, people will only see comments from people in their nearby neighborhood clusters, which is the experience they're accustomed to already. And then we are finally working on a Nextdoor for public agency app, which people have been asking forever. And so that will be coming this year, which I'm very excited about. And those are some of our things on the roadmap. And I know Anil has some specific questions, which I will answer in a little bit. I know you're waiting, but I don't want to steal some of his thunder. So I'm just going to continue and then we'll go from there. Now, for those of you who are not using Nextdoor, we'd love for you to come on board. The place to get started is nextdoor.com/agency. That page has a form at the top and you just fill it out. You tell us what type of agency you are, and we then look at that form, we verify you are who you say you are, we get in touch, and you'll be able to start communicating. And note that many, all public safety agencies are allowed to join, but if you are for example, a transportation, health, environment, other type of agency, you're welcome to use your city's shared kind of catch-all account or county account. So we may give you instructions on how to do that. Special districts, unfortunately, we really don't have a way to work with you folks very well at the moment, because the geometry and all the GIS is very complicated, and just frankly takes hours and hours of time, which we don't have the ability to work with everyone. So we're working on trying to find a way to do that. But I know that there's some folks that may hear that and feel disappointed. But I didn't want you to go through the process and not hear from a human being that isn't going to work for us. So with that said, Anil, this concludes my quick overview. I hope I did okay on timing and didn't go over. So let's jump back here on video cameras. How'd I do on timing? Was that okay?
Incredible job. That is the most efficient and engaging use of like 30 slides I've ever seen. So really nice job on that. And no worries about stealing thunder because we have an entire storm coming of questions. Just want to show the audience here. Page after page after page of questions submitted by our wonderfully engaged audience. One of the most wonderful things about this audience is that when we do these webinars, we put up the opportunity for questions, and the amount of caring out loud that we see from this audience on how to better serve citizens, the residents, it's loud and clear. So a lot to cover here. I thought it was really nice of you, though, to provide that update coming in 2019, because some of the questions did touch on things like analytics. We had a question about Nextdoor expanding reporting and analytics similar to other social media channels. Looks like that's exactly what you guys have done.
Yes.
Questions around targeting and being able to scope it to specific neighborhoods. You touched on that a little bit. So that's really nice of you to give us that update. It sounds like you've heard the feedback, you've made the updates. Obviously, a lot of other questions here. So I'm going to dive right in, Joseph.
Sure.
And for the audience that's joined us here today, we also see a lot of questions coming in through GoToWebinar. Keep them coming. I will try to sprinkle a few of those in as well. But if we can't get to them all, which we won't get to them all, I'll be honest with you, have no fear, both on the ArchiveSocial side and the Nextdoor side.
Absolutely.
we really want to answer these questions, whether it happens live here or offline, and we'll make sure to circle back. So with that, Joseph, I want to jump right in. And one of the points that I wanted to drill into with the audience here today is your focus on public agencies. It's actually
Yeah.
quite unique when you think about the social networking platforms like Facebook and Twitter and others.
Yeah.
Love those platforms. We personally have a great relationship with them. But Nextdoor is really unique in that you're actually focused on the public sector. That's really refreshing. You take the feedback, you build tooling for public agencies. So could you give us some insight for those who are just getting engaged with Nextdoor or leveraging some of the great tools today, how you've taken that feedback over time and incorporated it into the platform specifically for public sector use cases?
Sure. So let me just take a step back. When Nextdoor, when we did our research back in 2010, 2011 about, what is it that would be helpful for folks, we asked folks and said, hey, would you use this? How would it be really important? And people said it sounds like a good idea, but privacy is really important to us. So we made each neighborhood private. And then about a year later, people came to us and said, hey, it's really cool that we can talk to our immediate neighbors, but we also want to hear from people in surrounding neighborhoods. We're like, that makes sense. So we did that. And then later that year, they said, this is great that we can talk to each other and our surrounding neighbors, but we also want to hear from folks that protect and serve us from government. And we said, oh, that's really interesting. They said, we want to hear from them, but we don't want them exposed to everything we're talking about because we feel like that's private to us, and we don't want to overwhelm them with all our neighborly stuff. So we built Nextdoor for public agencies. And over the last couple of years, we really have taken an approach of listening and trying to understand what everybody needs. And I think one of the things that Nextdoor does, and that I feel very grateful for, because I share your gratitude and humility of being able to work with such an awesome group of people who care so much and are, working in civil service, is that we have a team of people dedicated, right? So we built the product for residents, we built the product for government, but we also knew that it would take someone who are approachable, who wanted to be there and really support folks. So I have a couple colleagues I just want to introduce real quick. I've got Alexa Kopelman, who's in the Northeast, kind of over to Michigan. I've got Robbie Turner, who's got Texas in the West. I've got Anna Stolfos in the greater San Francisco area. And then our colleague Parisa will be joining us in managing California starting March 1st. So there's a whole team of us, public agency leads, that really love our job and love working with folks. So if you do have feedback, we don't have to get it all today. If there's something else you need, get in touch with us and let us know. With that said, to answer your question specifically, it's really just been about understanding and balancing what our agency partners want, what our members need against all the other priorities we have as a company. But we really do try and do a great job of listening. We can't always deliver, right? Because there's other things happening. But we hope that the iteration of the platform and the feedback we get, from in-person conversations from the agency user community is incorporated and makes for a greater experience for everyone.
Love hearing the background. And listen, when you do something that is so impactful and important, you will get a lot of feedback. You can't do it all, but it's very clear that you've taken that feedback. And for those on the line here today who have Nextdoor questions, obviously you do. You submitted a lot. If you've ever hesitated asking those questions directly to Joseph or to Robbie or others, I can personally attest that they are incredibly responsive despite how much they have to do. So don't hold back. Definitely ask the question. You'll get some kind of response. And you'll see movement over time as more and more agencies echo some of the same needs as you have. So let me flip the question around on you now, because you did a really nice job, again, explaining the platform, the privacy balance and so forth, and what agencies can do. What would you say are some of the most common misconceptions that agencies currently have about Nextdoor that you can help clear up for us here today?
Sure. Thanks for asking this question. I think it has to do with the built-in audience. Since agencies are so used to getting people to follow or to fan you or subscribe to things, I think it's hard for people to understand, no, the audience is already there. It's built in. You can instantly start communicating with them. That'd be the first thing. I think the second thing is that most organizations are used to communicating as institutions, right? It's the something department. On Nextdoor, it comes from the person. So it'd be Joseph Porcelli from the city of Annapolis. And so it's a much more intimate type communication. In fact, all our data tells us that our members really appreciate that. So for instance, we did a comparison of posts there are some agencies that do the institutional name, and it turned out it was 114 point something % deficit of engagement. right? Because the intimacy of hearing from a real human being who has a name, it just works better for our culture. So a lot of folks just say, oh, we do it that way because that's the way other social platforms do it. We're not other social platforms. We have a very different approach. We really care about community and engagement and want to forge kind of those more personal ties to get back to increasing satisfaction, trust, and safety. So it's kind of woven into what we do. And I know that's a little different. And sometimes there are legitimate concerns. You have like a police officer who's also undercover. Probably not a good idea to use your name, and we get that, right? So we're not super stringent on it, but it's just a different approach. I would say those are our top two.
I really love that example too, because while on the surface someone might not be happy with it, you put a lot of thought into it, and you have a good reason for why you set those kinds of guidelines. And one of the topics you touched on in your presentation to get us going here was this issue of privacy is so important, right? You've got to respect those members and their privacy,
Yep.
with obligations of privacy you've made to them. At the same time, you want them to be able to engage with the agencies. We had a question come in that actually asked, if we get mentioned on a neighborhood page, can we get notifications for that?
So the answer is no. So the answer is no, not right now. But at the same time, we know that that creates a little bit of tension, and so we're looking and thinking about other ways that that could work. And I don't have anything concrete to share, but I want to acknowledge that we know that folks want that. We know that folks have concerns about that as well. And when I say folks, I mean folks in government. And then there's the privacy thing. So we are thinking outside of the box and rethinking how that could work. And I hope at some point soon that we'll be able to test some things and get feedback from our members and partners on how that could work.
Glad to hear you're thinking about it, and appreciate whoever asked that question. Obviously, keep asking these kinds of questions. We've seen Nextdoor respond time and time again and figure out a way to make the balance work. I want to switch gears a little bit. This was a pretty popular question, and it's quite relevant to my situation right now. So for those of you who've been sitting here wondering with this live webcam view, is he sitting in a hotel room? The answer is yes. I am currently at the Texas Schools Public Relations Association conference here in Austin, Texas. It's our annual conference, meeting with a lot of K through 12 districts. I know we have a lot of districts who registered for our webinar and submitted questions. Had, I think, like this many questions come in about this. I'm going to just share one of them verbatim for you. When can public school districts begin working with you? Our district has 65 schools in the urban area. Nextdoor would be so helpful for communicating with parents about school lockdowns or police activity in the area.
Yeah, so I don't have a answer to that question. It's come up a couple times, and I really appreciate it. And I will take it back to the team. One of the challenges that we have is because this is an opt-out platform and not everybody is a parent, we're not sure how to kind of find that balance. We've done a couple tests. And it was a couple years ago, but I'll bring that up to my colleagues and we'll revisit that conversation. And thank you for submitting that question. I'm sorry I don't have a more concrete answer for you.
Well, on a similar note, again, a lot of agencies very interested in your platform. You mentioned something about states in the closing portion of your talk there. We had questions come in from state agencies as well. Will you be adding state agencies to the platform?
Yeah, so we do have a couple state agencies right now. We focus on public safety because all of our data support, people say they want to hear from police, fire, emergency management. So we have, I'm just going to start Vermont Emergency Management, New Hampshire Emergency Management, Delaware Emergency Management and Police, Maryland Emergency Management, Ohio Public Safety, Oregon Emergency Management, Washington Emergency Management. Colorado has a state account, so a couple of folks are using it. Maryland also has a state account, and in Maryland, I'm familiar with this. We have Consumer Protection, Insurance Administration, a couple others. We have transportation in Colorado. We have a couple of transportation regions in Virginia. And so those were kind of experiments, but transportation's doing great. Some of the state accounts are doing great. So if you're a state agency and you'd like to have a conversation about whether that makes sense with us, go to nextdoor.com/agency and we'll explore that. I just actually spoke with a DNR agency earlier today, and it seems like there may be a use case for that. And so we'll do a pilot for 3 months and see how that goes. So we are willing to have conversations if that's outside the realm. But if you're a state public safety, we actually, in fact, in New Jersey, just Division of Fire just joined a couple, I think it was like a month or two ago. And so there are some opportunities for you there.
A great example of how you take the feedback from these other types of agencies, put a pilot together. Makes sense to lead with public safety as a beachhead. So appreciate the
Yep,
avenue here for our audience who submitted those questions. To switch gears a little bit, this is a topic near and dear to our customer base. I mean, I know we have a lot of customers here on the presentation on the webinar here today who have been asking us this question for quite a long time, or this question in this arena. So let me open up with this topic of archiving and public records, and
sure.
ask you, Joseph, when it comes to Nextdoor, what is the best practice today for agencies to ensure records compliance?
Sure. So Nextdoor actually stores all those records for you right now. So if you need it, there's that content and engagement tool under metrics. So in the product, if you're a Nextdoor partner, click on metrics, go to content and engagement. You can download that data right now. So we store it, we keep it forever, so it's there. I think the best practice, the legalities of it is you've got that covered right now. But I think a lot of folks are looking to an archive solution like ArchiveSocial where it can fit in with everything else. You just hit a button. I don't know how your system works, but it sounds convenient. That sounds good to me if I was in somebody else's position. But legally, we got you covered already.
Okay, and let me drill into that just a little bit here. So you said, hey, we have all the data.
Mm-hmm.
So if a resident replies to the agency, sends you a private message, can they delete? And if they can delete that content, is that still downloadable from your platform?
So if you remove, so let's say that Anil, you're an author of a content from, the city of Annapolis, and I comment back something rude that violates Nextdoor's guidelines or your policy, and you remove that content from view. The answer is yes, that is still downloadable.
Okay, deleted content still available on Nextdoor. And again, to recap, you mentioned this, you walked through it in your presentation, you just mentioned it now again, but just to walk through it, one of the exercises we have our agencies go through for if and when it happens. I'm a law enforcement agency. I've just received a records request touching on some public safety information I put out on Nextdoor. I did answer some questions about that. Likely some content was deleted, as happens on all social networks.
Sure.
I'm in my Nextdoor portal on the platform. How do I
Mm-hmm.
respond to that records request?
So I'm going to answer this in a couple different ways. However, whatever your policy is to respond to records requests, follow that first. And then if that includes content from Nextdoor, you go to the metrics tab and you click on that on the left-hand navigation. And then there are two tabs. There's metrics for your jurisdiction. So if it's a police department, all your police districts, and then it's got number of members, growth 30 days, household, so on and so forth. And then above that, there's a tab that says content and engagement. Click on that tab and you put the dates in, the date range from when you want that content at the beginning and the end, and then you download that, and there you go.
Okay, so there you have it. The data is on Nextdoor, even if it's been deleted from view. You have a records request. You can use Nextdoor's built-in tools to access the data, download it, respond to the records request. Now, Joseph, if I were to go do a Google search today and look for Nextdoor archiving, I actually find a couple of hits there. And I find that there are tools out there that say they can archive Nextdoor. They seem to be using web scraping, web crawling technology. Is it true that there are vendors out there that can archive Nextdoor? And when it comes to particularly web scraping, web crawling, how does that fit within your terms of service? Is that actually legally permitted?
All right, so I don't know too much about web scraping and crawling, so um, there are no companies that can archive Nextdoor data. Like that API has not been built yet. There are, in regards to the terms of service, I believe we do not allow that. So that isn't that is not I guess a solution, if you will. So
Okay.
my recommendation to folks is if you do get the request, go to Nextdoor now, follow the steps we just talked about, and get that data that you need.
Okay. So no authorized.
Did I answer all of that part of your question?
Yeah, and just to sum it up, nobody right now is authorized to archive Nextdoor as a third
No,
party.
no.
Nextdoor is the source of the data. If they try to do it by web scraping, that is against the terms of service. So for those of you who are ArchiveSocial customers, you've heard this from us for quite a while. We've directed you at Joseph and his colleagues. We've directed you at the download tool. That is the best practice. But on your behalf, I am going to put Joseph on the spot one more time in this conversation Joseph, we do want to bring Nextdoor content into ArchiveSocial. We do want to archive it natively. We want to have it there next to all the other social networking platforms within the tooling we have for helping agencies respond to records requests. Is that going to happen? What can you tell us about it?
I can confirm that it is going to happen. I just don't have a timeline at the moment.
Okay. Well, for the agencies listening, you can tell that Joseph really cares deeply about the feedback. It listens to the feedback, pushes for action. Joseph, is it fair to say that agencies who really feel strongly that this should be integrated into a platform like ArchiveSocial, how best to hear from them?
Ask your question one more time.
For agencies that really care about this issue of having the ability to archive Nextdoor within a platform like ArchiveSocial, do you want to hear from them? How best to hear from them?
We do. Any and all feedback is absolutely welcome. There's a couple. So when we make that available, and this also goes along with scheduling posts, I believe those two things will be hand in hand. I know there's questions about that. I heard a conversation earlier today. Someone's like, when can I schedule posts? I get it. We get it. We know you want it. It's coming. We will make those announcements, but the best way to give feedback to us is via the agency community. So on that left-hand side navigation, you have metrics, and then beneath that, there's the agency user community by help. There's a feedback section there. We monitor that all the time. We share reports to the engineers and the product managers. So that's a great place to give us feedback, especially with some of the nuances. Like, what are some of the things that are most important to you? Not just like, we want to schedule posts, great. But if you go more like, I want to schedule posts because, and I really want this little unique feature, that's super helpful for us.
Great. Well, again, your openness to feedback goes a long way. It's something very unique to your platform in comparison to the other social networks that have a lot of different focus areas. Public agencies tend not to be the primary focus area as public agencies are for Nextdoor. So again, appreciate your openness to the feedback. So I'm going to tie a bow on this archiving records topic. Any other questions or comments from you, Joseph, before we move
Yeah,
on to the questions?
I think there's a lot of folks from Nextdoor who joined this webinar because they really wanted to get a sense of like, why is this important? Can you just take me through like a 101? Like, is this legally required? I know there's like sunshine laws and the FOIA request. Can you just give us a basic overview? Because I want to make sure all of our partners that are listening in get that like baseline, and then any like current nuances that people really need to have.
Oh, absolutely. So for those of you not as familiar with the public records requirements, especially as they pertain to social media, first off, there are public records requirements that pertain to social media. They are the public records laws that you've had in your jurisdiction for decades upon decades. The laws that require you to maintain copies of documents and emails, those same public records laws were written in a very future-proofed fashion. Typically, they say something like any communication sent or received, regardless of physical form pertaining to the business of the agency, is a public record. So again, if you get a complaint from a resident on a piece of paper, it's a public record potentially. If you get it in an email, it's a public record. If you get it on Nextdoor as a comment, as a reply, it's a public record. Also as a Twitter direct message, a Facebook comment, so on and on. So social media is public record. States across the country have not only had public records laws for many decades, Joseph, but they've also, over the last 5 to 6 years, come out with very explicit guidance about social media, social networks like Nextdoor and Facebook and others.
I noticed the topic has been talked about at like GSMCom, other conferences and stuff.
Yeah.
So this is definitely, it's good to hear there's more guidance to guide folks through this process. I remember like 5 years ago, it definitely seemed very intimidating to folks.
Right. There's a lot of questions being asked, and now it's pretty clear that the guidance had to be there. States like secretaries of state's offices, state archives have put out documents in the last 3 to 4 years in a majority of states saying social media is a public record. If you put any unique information on there, if you have any kind of engagement back and forth, again, what you receive, the comments and replies you receive are just as much public record. You must do something about it. You must have a plan to be able to get data out of the social network. These are the kinds of requirements and guidelines that states have put out in virtually every state across the country. We have a bit.ly/SM public records. If regardless of which state you're in, really, go to that bit.ly/SM public records, and you can see that guidance. So I'll stop there on the legal sort of framework. The reality is, Joseph, also we've seen a tremendous amount of case law, real public records requests real legal situations involving social media content. For agencies active on Nextdoor, you're putting out public safety information. You're putting out information related to with crimes, natural disasters. A good example I'll give folks is when Hurricane Irma came through, impacted obviously a significant portion of Florida. And so we have many agencies in Florida, like St. Johns County Sheriff, that in order to get their FEMA funding needed to provide a timeline of all the communications that they had put out and
Wow.
provide all records of communications they'd put out in preparation for the storm.
Mhm.
And of course, where did they put out most of those communications? Social media. So they're able to use our archiving software to produce those records to get FEMA funding. We have agencies like Deerfield Beach and Framingham, Massachusetts, that have literally taking social media records, comments to court as legal evidence to protect the agency and win legal battles. And the last thing I'll say on that is that social media provides such an important platform for open dialogue. Open dialogue is a benefit to all of us, but open dialogue then leads to controversy and opinions, right? Sometimes you have a feature on your platform, Joseph, that allows you to mute, right? It allows you to mute somebody. Well, there is this a wave of concern in the public agency sphere around First Amendment, and we've seen this time and time again from the president to governors to local officials being in the news for censoring and blocking, right? Removing comments, hiding comments. Perhaps we'll see a mute is bound to happen. And what you as an agency need to do is you have to have clear policies. And then when this becomes an issue, because it will, you want to be able to show that you have followed your policies. And the only way to do that is with record keeping and archiving.
Let me ask you a question. So you gave that bit.ly link earlier. If someone wants to see like sample policies, or they're curious about like what are the cases that trip people up, does that link include that, or is there another resource that they should go to?
I appreciate you asking that. So the link does take folks straight to a page on our website with a map of the United States. When you click on your state, we provide the actual guidance from each state. It's all formal guidance from each state, but it's on our website. So if you look at the top of that page, look for the resources section, and we have quite a library of complementary resources we put out, including social media policy templates. We have this great comment moderation guide, which not only presents the legal makeup of a good comment removal policy, but we actually worked with a customer of ours, Wake County, North Carolina, to share this out. They created this wonderful resource, which is just a flow chart. And so you have legalese, and you want your staff members to follow the policy, but they have to remember the legalese. That's really hard. Why not give them this nice flow chart that walks them through, hey, does that comment, does it have profanity in it? Yes or no? Does it have copyrighted material? Yes or no?
Super
So we have
helpful.
resources like that. So definitely check that out on our website. And
And
then
what
of
was
course,
that link again? Because I already forgot what you said. Sorry. To the
the
policy
link,
the bit.ly.com link.
bit.ly/SM public records.
Thank
You
you.
can also go to archivesocial.com. Very easy to find the map. Go to Y archive for the map. Go to resources for the case studies and templates as well.
Okay, that's great. I'm sorry, I derailed you a little bit there. Just to build on this, the last question I asked, what trips people up? Like if someone said to me, like, Joseph, what do I got to watch out for? Like what what do you wish most people knew that they don't know about archiving?
The number one misconception when it comes to archiving is that I can just go back to the platform. Now, it's true for Nextdoor. Let me reiterate that. It's true that you can go back to Nextdoor for your records because Nextdoor has gone out of their way, as you've heard from Joseph, to retain information that's deleted. That is not true for any of the other social networks. And most times we talk to agencies, they say, yeah, no, we do post a lot of important stuff on social media. We've had some controversies. We've had some back and forth, some potential legal issues. But you know what? I'll just go back to Facebook. Well, the truth is, if you go back to Facebook, what's there is there, but if it's been deleted, it's gone. And we've actually done studies on this showing hundreds upon hundreds of records being deleted in a month on an agency's social media presence. So the next thing that agencies will say to us, well, we don't delete anything, so that won't happen to us. Well, staff members do sometimes delete. The thing that most people forget, though, is that the citizens have the equal opportunity to post and delete, right, their own content. And so what happens is that citizens will provide crime tips, other information that could be of real record value, and they change their mind, they delete it, and it's just gone. They may even quit Facebook. When you quit Facebook, it pulls out everything, right? If they delete their comment and the agency's responded to it, and there's been this long thread, if you delete the top comment, that's the parent of that thread, the whole thread goes away. There's all these ways that information disappears. So unlike Nextdoor, every other social network has this opportunity for data to disappear. And it probably, if you're not archiving today, you're probably losing records actively and need to be doing something about that.
And let me just take this a step further. So those records are gone. What happens? Like, do I get in trouble? Do I get fined? Like, what is the penalty? Is there a penalty that people need to understand?
Oh, absolutely. There's been multiple. Unfortunately, there's been multiple There's a lot of case law lawsuits across the country around this. The $10,000 settlement in Florida, where a county clerk's office removed some comments that were critical. The citizen noticed that, filed a First Amendment lawsuit, asked for the records. The clerk's office couldn't produce the records. So then they filed a second lawsuit for the office not fulfilling its public records requirements. So we've seen that across the country in Florida, New Mexico, California had a lawsuit with San Mateo where the the police department's Twitter account was hacked. The entire direct message history was deleted. And then a citizen issued a records request for those direct messages while they were gone. So we've seen a tremendous amount of case law. Again, a lot of this on our website. I know, and I appreciate the clarification on this set of topics. I know we're coming up with 10 minutes left. What I'd love to do, Joseph, is offer to the audience the opportunity to draw in on this one-on-one offline. For those of you coming from the Nextdoor audience, if you haven't talked to us yet about your public records requirements and what you can do about it, I'm going to put up a quick little screen here. And what I want to offer to you all of you is we can take that conversation of archiving offline, specifically rather than talk about products and so forth. Let's talk about you and your legal requirements. That's what we like to do here at ArchiveSocial. So if you'd like to learn more about the public records requirements, find out who of your peers are addressing this issue, and I think most impactfully, hear about the case studies, the records requests that have happened around you, perhaps in your county or in a county next door. That's the kind of stuff that we're happy to talk to you about offline. If that then shows up as a real issue that you'd like to address through that first conversation, we can then talk about products and how we might help. So wanted to put up a quick poll here before we get to the next set of questions. For those of you who would benefit from learning more about archiving, who's doing it around you, we work with nearly 2,000 agencies across the country. Likely that we're working with many of your neighbors. If you want to learn more about the records laws, case law, so forth, go ahead and answer this optional poll. We'll leave this up for just a couple of minutes. And while that's up, Joseph, I'm going to switch back to some more questions. I like how you turned that around on me for a little bit, but I got a bunch here for you. So I hope you're ready for us to finish out these next 8 minutes with as many questions as possible.
I'm ready. What you got?
All right. So you talked about the app, working on the mobile app. You mentioned scheduling. Do those two things go hand in hand, or is that TBD?
So the app we're working on now. And then scheduling will be, my understanding is scheduling will come out around the same time as the API for archiving.
Okay, great. So sounds like all things that you are working on. Now, let me take us back to some of the targeting questions, because you mentioned it in your presentation, but perhaps by asking you the more specific question, we can figure out if there's a nuance here or not. Is it possible to set up a targeted area that includes multiple neighborhoods? For example, we're closing a major highway this summer for 2 weekends.
Yep.
I want to post about the closure, but only to the area neighborhoods directly impacted, not the entire county. Is that possible today?
I would use the neighborhood targeting tool. So when you go to post a message, you choose your audience, go to neighborhoods, and then the rectangle that you can draw. If it's a long line, it makes it really easy. You just kind of go just beyond the boundary of the highway, and you can select all those neighborhoods. If you have a squiggly highway, for example, you can just click around the highway, and it will select all the neighborhoods near where the highway is, and you can go out kind of as far as you feel is appropriate. So that's the way I would handle that. Oftentimes, though, if you can give us custom service areas that your GIS department can create for you, but those should be areas that you will regularly communicate into. So, for example, if you're an emergency management agency, those might be flood zones or EPZ zones. If you're a Department of Public Works, that might be your sanitation districts or your whatever that makes sense to you. So there's a couple options that are available to folks. But for one-time communications, just using that neighborhood tool and clicking around is the best bet.
Awesome. Thank you for the detailed answer there. It's great to see that there's that level of sophistication in the tooling. I'm actually going to take a question here from the live audience that's been submitted during the course of the presentation here today. And we actually had several questions like this come in as well prior to the webinar. So hopefully we'll be able to encapsulate them all in this question. I'm the rep for my police department. Can my counterpart in the town hall get access like the police department?
Yeah. So the police department can have an account. The fire department can have an account. The emergency management agency can have an account, and the city can have an account. And multiple users from different departments can use that city account to communicate. You can have multiple users in all accounts, but you do want some granularity between public safety agencies and the regular agency. That allows for granularity and unsubscription. So if somebody unsubscribes from the city, they'll still get police, fire, and emergency management, which are those life safety communications.
And on the topic of unsubscriptions, can you actually see in the analytics how many unsubscribes have happened?
At the moment, no, but you can see mutes. We will be advocating that you can, so you can get more data. However, we have internal controls that will get pinged if a whole bunch of people start unsubscribing or muting, because we'll look to see what may be going on there.
Gotcha. And you mentioned having these multiple accounts. Going back to that, with the city, public safety, you're advocating for separate Nextdoor accounts there.
Yeah.
To really keep it granular, particularly in terms of the unsubscribes. To push on this a little bit more, can you actually merge the city's account with the police department, or are you recommending against that?
We recommend against that for a couple of reasons. One, there's a police only feature called Forward to Police, and there will be police only features in the future. And so if the police department's in the city, you wouldn't have access to it. So it's just kind of like a good organizing framework that we ask folks to follow. Now, there are some smaller towns and cities that just one PIO and they do everything. We get it, right? It's not, you guys make it work for the way that your organization works. We get there's culture, politics, that kind of stuff. But my previous statements were around what we think works best. And just to touch on the last question about unsubscribes, we don't show you unsubscribes, but we do show you the growth each month, which I think a lot of people haven't seen in the metrics. So look at your mutes, you can download that spreadsheet and you'll see the number of people every 30 days, and you should steadily see that grow over time. And if that's, if you're not sure, like if it's growing fast enough or not, people can ping us. But typically, great content and engagement makes that curve go higher. So you want to be seeing that over time.
Very cool. We had a lot of questions. There's so many agencies out there doing important work and engaging their citizens across social media, and therefore they're interested in Nextdoor. So I'm going to run through a bunch of these questions with you, Joseph. Understanding, again, we've heard the answer sometimes is no, not today, not yet. But we'd love to, if there are agencies like these types of agencies, we'd love to hear an example off the top of your head. Sounds like you've got a pretty good grasp on your customer base, amazingly, with 5,000 agencies. And so one of the questions you mentioned in the city that you have a focus on separating out public safety. What about the Parks and Rec department?
So in Parks and Rec, so in Annapolis, the director of communications has access, is a user in the city's account. So she posts out stuff for Parks and Rec from the city. So Parks and Rec, transportation, health, all the different ones, environment, social services can all have user profiles in the city's account. And the way that works is the title field would say Parks and Rec, and then it would say Joseph Porcelli for the name.
Okay, got it. And what about libraries? Interested in knowing if there are any public libraries already using the app and how this is working for them.
There aren't, but at the discretion of the page, the administrator of the city's page, they could add them.
Okay, got it. Again, channel it through the main city page. You're the staff member responsible for that department. Your name is there. Folks get to know you as the person, the human.
Yes.
That's great, the face of that agency.
Correct.
Makes a lot of sense. We are a public utility and having difficulty getting approval for a Nextdoor agency account. Any changes coming up that would allow that?
So the same thing I just described for the library, a public utility could use the city's page. So it would be, Joseph from Annapolis Electric or whatever the utilities. Actually, it's here. It's a private one. That's not a great example. Sorry, everybody, but hopefully the point is made that you could just use that city or county account to communicate with residents.
Okay. And then flipping back, you had talked about state agencies doing the pilot program. One last one on this line of questioning. We're responsible for policing a transit system that travels through multiple cities. How can Nextdoor help us?
So, great question. I did a pilot last year in New Jersey with New Jersey Transit, where we gave them access to communicate with all Nextdoor members a mile on either side of the tracks, and it's gone awesome. So, whoever asked that question, ping me on Twitter at Joseph Porcelli, or you can email me as Joseph at Nextdoor, and we'll talk about it.
And what a great note to go out on. Again, Joseph, you've made yourself accessible to us today for the past hour. We covered quite a lot of ground. What I love most about you is how accessible you make yourself to your agencies, to your partners, and the entire ecosystem. Thank you for doing that.
Thanks for having me, and it's a real honor to be here. Having worked in government, I wish there was a Nextdoor. When I was in this role, it would have made my job a lot easier. So thank you, everyone, for spending an hour of your afternoon with Anil and I. And Anil, thanks for organizing and hosting, and your staff for all the support. I hope everybody feels great about spending time with us today, and thank you.
My pleasure, and thank you all for joining us.
All right. Take care, everyone.